everyone, and welcome to our virtual community engagement session. I wanted to tell you this is our 6-month anniversary, our sixth show, and so we'll be running one more month for the school year, and then we'll be finished. But Dr. Wade, do you see these happening next year?
Yes, yeah. It seems to always be a question about whether or not, like, oh, do you actually mean that you're going to do it? Yeah, we're going to continue these, and I think because I think these virtual engagement sessions, they serve their own purpose, but we're also going to be providing additional opportunities, but more in person next year. That's something I've historically done where I've come from. That's usually been very beneficial, where the superintendent and the cabinet can be there to answer any questions and kind of hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, on questions, concerns, or whether they're real or perceived issues with what's going on. So that'll also be in place for next year as well. So plenty of opportunities for engagement.
That's great. I forgot to introduce, of course, our star of the show,
I'm the soup.
Dr. Nicholas Wade, in case this is your first time joining us. This format is we get questions from our stakeholders throughout the month, and we bring them here and ask them, Dr. Wade, his thoughts on them. So let me jump right in. I was thinking about our very first session way back when, where it was COVID, and we've got some COVID, but a little bit lighter, given where we were 6 months ago and where we are today.
It's an interesting, I kind of reflect on that a lot, where I feel like another interesting sign you're going back to normal is that now people's interests or preoccupation, and I mean that affectionately, is kind of shifting to what would be considered the typical grind or day in and day out.
Yeah,
so I think that's always, for me, kind of an uplifting sign when people are talking about curriculum or programming and other opportunities. Good philosophical stuff.
So
buses.
So okay.
Always a favorite topic.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of favorite topics, let me jump right in on our first question, and that is, what is your plan with wearing masks for the remainder of this school year?
Yeah, I think I've been pretty consistent, whether here in person or at the board meeting, that the plan is to keep wearing the mask throughout the rest of this school year. I think everyone understands that probably next year we're going to be working on amending current board policy, where it allows the option for students and staff to kind of wear their masks if they so choose. I know one of the things that's kind of been coming up every now and again, is do we have to wear a mask if outside? Because obviously in South Carolina it gets hot. And obviously, even per guidance and board policy, as has been also directed all the buildings, which is have that flexibility when students are outside during recess or physical education, to kind of provide some of that leniency as well. So that's where we're pretty much going. Guidance is still that. I know every now and again people like to show me a random quote or blog post or anything else, and in the end we have to go with what the official guidance is, not just for I guess practical and ethical reasons, but also the callous liability reasons as well. So we still kind of continue to follow all that. Obviously, with that being said, I can already hear someone probably miles away saying, but what if they remove all that guidance by Memorial Day? All right, and as we do with everything else, we'll adapt. Kind of like how we got rid of the plexiglass dividers and all that. I mean, we're going to continue to do what we need to do that's best.
So what I guess I'm hearing you say is, for now, we're going to be keeping masks in classrooms,
yes,
around the halls when kids are moving.
Within the buildings.
The buildings, but that there are opportunities outside as the weather warms, that perhaps during recess,
right,
or
yes,
with some level of discretion. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Temporary. That sounds good. Okay. Thank you. So my next question. What other changes can we see to the district's mitigation efforts and COVID-related policies, and when would these be in effect?
I mean, kind of, stemming from what I said, we are obviously always adapting to what the guidance is, that's kind of coming down. The dividers are a good example and all that. I mean, we already know we're taking into consideration some of the guidance that is changing, like there's no longer be social distancing on buses, so that's something that'll change for next year. And I think in terms of mitigation efforts, I think next year it's definitely like, masks, will more than likely be optional. I think we're kind of seeing where what the trajectory actually is. I think then, like, you're kind of getting more into board policy stuff. I think a good example is really the, public participation. That's been kind of we're doing virtual and all that. So I think what's going to be starting like in the May board meeting and kind of especially in June is really looking at all those particular policies and either amending them or outright removing them because either they will no longer kind of make sense or they need to adapt. I know, there's been the streaming of all the board meetings. That's going to continue because I know a lot of people like that and they can view it whenever they wish. I definitely see, changing for next year, the whole thing about, capacity, limits within rooms or venues, that's starting to slowly change, and that could change even before graduation. We don't know if that's true. We just know,
Stay tuned.
But it could very well happen, and we got to adapt to, that wonderful minefield when it happens. And, so these things are quickly happening. They are happening. I think that's always kind of important to stress is, these changes it may not be as visual or everything else, but I think just looking at the news and looking at it, just looking at what the data is kind of telling us with the number of people who are becoming vaccinated and getting closer to that sense of herd immunity and everything else. I mean, that's all moving in a direction that you can tell a lot of our local, state, and even, national leaders and elected officials are starting to say, originally it was like July 4th, and now they're talking about Memorial Day. I mean, so things are getting better. I think everyone, after dealing with the year, I get it. It's like, I'm done. I'll admit I'm done wearing this, but but I think these are, we all have a reality to live within. So I think we're moving in that direction. I think a lot of normal is going to be back in place for next year. I feel very confident in saying that. And I think that'll be kind of like a calming effect on a lot of people. Even kind of going to the mask. I know a lot of our staff are concerned about removing the mask, before the end of the year, but they understand too that going into next year, like it's going to be optional. And again, it's like, but that gives more time for the vaccine and other things to improve and get better.
Right.
And it's more of a psychological thing as well.
Well, and I think you and I were sharing a story last night. I think the Department of Education is looking at that mask mandate as well, just as we move into next year. So as you were talking about things that, looking ahead. One thing I wanted to mention in case y'all were busy yesterday and didn't hear the news that Pfizer was getting closer to vaccine rollouts. 12 and up.
Yeah.
So, that's something some of our families might want to stay tuned to if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, so right now it's down to, it's 16, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe it's 16.
Yeah, 16 and up for Pfizer. I think, I can't remember if, I don't think Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are 16, but Pfizer is. Not. And Pfizer's the one that's the 12 and up. So
I think there's all this progress happening where I think, and even if you look, like if you want to do like a real like 30,000 foot view, even just when you look, even nationally speaking, places that, were inherently locked down and still, whether reasonable or not, still were, even to, a few weeks ago. Now they're having already like concert series like are coming back and everything else. Yeah. Like it's such an abrupt shift. And that's what happens when the vaccine starts becoming available, people are taking it and everything else. I think, again, we're seeing that shift. We can pretty much, that's why I feel confident in saying what next school year is going to look, I think it's going to look a lot more normal than people may have feared at one point earlier this year.
So we were talking about shifts. Let me just come around to that last question. We were talking about some of the mitigation efforts. What is still going on in schools? I remember you discussing the desk dividers were optional. Are we still practicing social distancing, for example? Do we still
Yeah, to the
have
greatest-
hyper cleaning
To the
around
greatest
schools
extent
and such?
possible
Okay.
for social distancing
Okay.
per DHEC guidelines, and then for the then there's still like the misting and the cleaning that's happening. I know one thing that we're probably gonna be aggressively moving forward on is for next year, just to kind of, it's not just doing a check the box, but I think now it's becoming good practice, just seeing how everything unfolded the last year.
Right.
Like replacing all the water fountains with bottle filling stations, or really looking at our HVAC system and all of that. I mean, I think those are sensible and safe bet steps that we're going to be
Yeah.
taking as we move forward
Yeah.
over the next
And
few
those
months.
I think those are pluses.
Well,
for
I think
sure.
there are positive things
Right.
that some have really enjoyed from the I mean, I think that's been a real big conversation about, there have been some positives that have kind of improved upon some operations and other things, and we're evaluating that as well as we kind of talk about reopening. That includes start and end times, which we don't know yet. Board meeting May 20th, but, we're still working on all that.
Great. So do you still plan, given what we were just talking about with reopenings and shifts gradually toward back to normal, do you still see us having the end of the year events, proms,
Yeah, that's
outdoor
still-
graduations?
Yeah, that's still
promotions,
happening.
ceremonies?
And I thought we've been pretty open and consistent about that. But I mean,
Okay.
I'll admit I got cornered at a grocery store this this weekend, and someone asked me why we're not having prom. I was like, but you are having prom, and that has been communicated. So like, I mean, all the end of the year events are happening. So no one's saying no, don't do it, and I believe everything's being held. I know I'm getting invitations to them, so I like to think I'm not attending a virtual event. So, I mean, we are having all of them, so.
Good. Do you have any updates? I know that the schools are putting out some information about graduation. I'm just trying to see do you have any just for the general audience?
We're having it. And
Outdoors,
yeah,
stadium.
yeah. You can go, you
Where
can
8 o'clock starts.
You
I
can direct
think.
all
Right.
questions to your respective
Okay.
buildings.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I have seen some social media about graduation online. I just couldn't remember
I think
what
it's
I
like
had seen, so I was wondering if.
Yeah, I almost about to say number of tickets, and I didn't want to say that in case something changed.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have this,
The
be
schools
held.
are putting that out.
But Dr.
I think
Wade
people will be pleased
said this,
with those.
and so, call your respective high school.
Very good. Okay, and now I guess I'm moving on. And again, thank you to those of you who sent in questions. I'm looking at my list, so I appreciate that. So now it looks like what I have next is non-COVID related.
Yay.
So, well, okay, not quite. Okay, there, yeah, psych, yeah. So there's a lot of talk about all the federal money school districts and states have been receiving related to COVID. What can you tell us about how Lexington 2 will be using those funds?
So a lot of it is with the expectation to either kind of help out with, mitigation efforts even leading to next year, or learning loss, and obviously dealing with all the respective effects of what COVID has done to our students for the last year plus, right? And that's, from academics to social emotional, to other types of support systems or whatever. So I think it's going to be a pretty wide array of a number of things that we're going to take an opportunity to do, because I think we've definitely seen the impact COVID has brought upon us, like in terms of, let's say, again, learning loss and our mental health needs of the students. I think it's a very safe bet that what we're going to be looking at is trying to create some structured support services, whether it's within the day or even outside of the school day, to try and build upon that. I think it's trying to provide consistency in what is occurring within the learning environment. That kind of goes into program articulation and updating that, so that way there's common language and expectations that allow us to be better responsive to what the needs of the students are, whether it's in terms of, intervention or enrichment. I think those are big pieces. I think it's really also, a lot of professional development, for our staff, and a number of these different things, including, in differentiation and instructional strategies, interventions and supports, content development, you name it. I think it's also getting the appropriate amount of FTE. I think it's also looking at some of our learning environments, trying to make them more mobile, and kind of make it a little bit, so that way there can be some space and a little bit of flexibility. So we'll kind of see play with that. That could mean potentially some renovations or new classroom furniture, looking at the HVAC system, updating our technology infrastructure, and getting and having more available accessibility of devices for our students and staff. And I think it's kind of make sure that we realize that blended learning environment. So that way, if we ever have to go, God willing, we don't go back to remote. But if you ever did, at least that's not something we actually have to worry about as well. I mean, I probably listed a whole lot of things, and I probably didn't do any of it justice. But I mean, there's a significant amount of money, and that's what we're asked to do. I know on the 12th, we're going to be told, I think for me, the biggest thing is about when all that money has to be encumbered. And what that means for you viewers at home is whenever the state or feds want to give you money, they tell you got to spend it by this date. When they say spend, that means encumber. And for me, I think if you're giving me a ridiculous amount of money, and it's a lot of money, and I've never been in this situation where I have money in the way.
Right.
I never had this problem. It's usually always been like a multi-year
Right.
plan to try and budget it accordingly. It'd be great if it could be encumbered beyond 2 school years or fiscal years, or however you want to look at that. For me, if they tell us that we can actually have this encumbered over 4 or 5 years, that's fantastic, because that helps us out with ensuring that we get systems and support in place to really do the best work that we can to meet that learning loss and those social emotional needs of our students. So, I've been very open saying I'm hesitant to invest a lot of that money into FTE if I only have a year or two, because I don't want to bring all this stuff
Right.
and then pull the rug out. But I mean, if you tell me I got 4 or 5 fiscal years, I can be persuaded. So I think there's a lot that we can do. I think by mid-end of May, then it's kind of a lot of things are kind of solidified about what we can and when we can, and then I'm going to be very excited.
So will that be across all levels,
All grade
elementary,
levels.
middle, and high school?
Even adult ed, early childhood,
wow.
all
Okay.
that. So it gives us a lot of interesting opportunities.
Great. So you touched on SEL, and in our last session, we went through a lot of really cool programs that you're looking forward to. And so I picked one that I've been hearing a lot about, in my email box this week, tons on social emotional learning. And it's really a topic of the moment. And so I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about SEL and what you're thinking about.
I know a lot of our employees are very excited that it's getting the attention it deserves. And so right now what the plan is, so for SEL, actually we should write, SEL is social emotional learning. And what SEL is kind of where you really help students become very much aware and cognizant of their actions and their surroundings, so that way they can positively engage with those around them, be appropriately responsive, but then it's also they make the right decisions when faced with adversity. And I've really simplified that. It's a very challenging piece. So one of the things that we're going to be moving forward on is having a social emotional learning curriculum throughout all the grade levels. And I know a lot of people are very much excited about that. And
Is that like a class? Or is it just like, might be a thread that runs through?
Yeah, what will more than likely happen is that we'll have time that we'll be selecting certain weeks, and we'll say we're going to take X minutes out of the day to execute, like 20, 30 minutes for the teachers to kind of implement a lesson. And what's really important about that is that when you have an SEL curriculum and it's being done with fidelity, it also starts strengthening the relationships between our educators and our students as well, and also builds up a different sense of camaraderie. Guys, I kind of dated myself with that word. Amongst the students. And what's really important though from that is you start having some very interesting discussions and dynamics where what's also then equally important to all that is actually having individuals that are properly trained to deal with some of the more challenging elements of a student's development, or perhaps they experience trauma or whatever it may be. And also kind of then putting in place some systems and screeners and all these different things. And so one of the things that's been very elusive here in the district has been school social workers. And that's something that we're going to be investing in moving forward. That's much needed and a long time coming, and we need those individuals with implementing the SEL curriculum, because then as students start sharing, whether openly or to the teacher, that you need to be able to direct that individual, that can direct that student to an individual who's going to provide them assistance. So you have the SEL curriculum, you got the school social worker, and then on top of that, at the global level, is getting a partnership with this nationally recognized SEL institution called Castle. Well, what they do is they kind of come in, they talk to students, parents, and as well as educators to kind of talk about what are all the different systems and supports that we actually have for everyone. But they also kind of connect you to resources, provide like a roadmap and guidelines, and kind of provide that little coaching along the way. So we're hitting it on all these different levels. And that's probably the most comprehensive introductory way we can introduce, SEL into Lexington 2. So I'm very much excited about that. It's really a dying on the hill type thing, and I know a lot of our staff, and actually, a lot of parents, and interested stakeholders. I mean, they've expressed that this needs to happen, and it's something that we need to beef up a bit more.
So do you expect that we'll be hearing more, leading
Yes.
up to the new school year? Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Dr. Wade, you want to add for?
Is that it?
Actually, I was going easy on you.
Oh. It has been a few weeks.
And frankly, a lot of the questions we got from folks were about masks, were
Oh,
about,
same
what about
stuff.
end of year and
Yeah.
such. So, I guess I will throw out a few reminders. I wanted to let folks know, anybody in district interested in adult education, we have some GED boot camps. One of the first session is closed, but we have one coming up in June, I believe, with a deadline in May. We've got information on our district website about that. Also, in terms of reminders, registration is now open for next year for new and returning students. That includes our 4K and 5K, and I have to just say personally, very excited that rising, 4K and our 5K are going to be in person, because those first days of school for your youngest learners and such are so big in our community, and so I'm excited to see those kids back 5 days a week, which all of our students will be 5 days face-to-face next year. Anything else?
I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Not bad.
We have
Not
a lot,
bad.
really, but
Not bad for a Wednesday. I've been up since 1, so it's
we've got a lot going on. So anyways, well, again, we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you in June, at first week in June. Or
I'm sure it'll be eventful.
It will. Send in your questions. It's important. We love getting them. I know Dr. Wade does. So thank you, and have a good evening.